All right, thank you for staying with us. President Bola Tinubu says Nigeria will overcome terrorism and banditry, assuring citizens that security and economic recovery remains at the heart of his administration priorities. The president gave the assurance while declaring the second National Economic Council Conference in Abuja, which brought together governors, ministers, and of course, development partners, private sector players, and key leaders of the economic decisions across the state. But let's look at that speech as presented by President Bola Tinubu. Very, very deep one, I must say. And I have in the studio Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, CEO, UHY Professional Services. I must thank you so much. He's the former president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Well, it's good to have you live in the studio. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you, Toru.
Yes. I'm sure you've seen that speech. And first, I would say that what is catching my attention for the first is charging members of NERC to work hand in hand with government. And many have said that we expect more from the sub-nationals to support the federal government. At this time where we are talking about consolidating on the reforms, stability, and all of that. What do you make of all of this reading that speech first?
Essentially, the first point is that Nigeria is a federal government, 36 states, and 774 local governments. So any policy that can be effective or productive will have to trickle down through the entire system. And I think that was the major point that was being made, that any policy to make sense, to get the results, must permeate the entire system. That means the entire membership of NEC, the governors, and even their local government administrations have to ingrain national policies into their own activities. Otherwise, the national policy will just be floating in Abuja, and all the states are doing
different things.
I think it's extremely important to put that on the table before we say how effective the reforms have been and where we can now take the benefit of those reforms going forward. There has to be a full commitment of the state governors and their local government chairman. Otherwise, there is no traction in policy execution when it has been formulated by the federal government.
Moving from recovery to transformation, from discussion to action. You know, I'm seeing all of this like we are getting to a phase in these reforms that even like my earlier discussion, the likes of World Bank and IMF has commended Nigeria. So now recovery to transformation, discussion to action. What actions do you think needs to be taken now?
Well, the actions are clearly stated in the reform agenda. We have done the basics, unified foreign exchange rates, remove the fuel subsidy. On top of that, mandate the states to drive the electricity market, which is extremely important. Those basics are there. What are the actions? The states need to move very, very, very quickly to begin to build their electricity markets very quickly. That is an opportunity that the states have asked for a long time. And now we want to see, and in these some states have already done that. You have at least one or two states that are very close to almost complete power solutions in their own states. So we want to see more states resolving the power issue, taking control of the power market, and executing actions in terms of attracting investors. And it's the quality of the policy, the electric market in each state, electricity market in each state, that will determine how fast you see our electricity problems being resolved. So that is the kind of action we expect in other sectors, that once the policy has been made and adopted, each of the players, the local government and the state government, should begin to take a lot of action to implement the policies. So it's essentially policy execution at every level. It is that execution that is the action. The policies are clear. There is really no more debate about the reforms themselves. It is what are we doing with the reforms and who is doing what. The federal government can say, okay, we have taken the decision to let states take responsibility for certain things, and the federal government will take responsibility for certain things. When it comes to power, the federal government still has a significant role to play at the generation and transmission level. So specifically at the transmission level, government needs to take the action to either completely privatize the transmission section of the market or have a mix of private and government ownership to the level where, like the Nigerian LNG, you have private sector having a slight majority so that the transmission grid can now run with the kind of benefits we are seeing in Nigerian LNG. A small private sector majority holding, a very large but a very effective public sector holding, and the synergy between the private sector and the public sector interest will ensure the transmission company or companies that will be built out of what we have now will begin to work very quickly. And then the states and the local governments can empower generation, distribution, and transmission within their states, and a national transmission company that works very efficiently, like the Nigeria LNG, will ensure that we finally resolve the power industry issues in Nigeria. So that is the kind of actions we want to see very quickly in each section of the economy. Of course, there's the underlying issue of security. We need to address the security situation in a sustainable manner. The sustainable manner is the constitutional framework for that security. You cannot expect to have sustainable security in the long term if you don't have multi-level policing. Because there is just no science for the IG sitting in Abuja to look after every village in a state like Niger State that is bigger than 5 states put together. So there is just no science, no police science in anywhere in the world, a country as large as Nigeria, where it works. In most countries we want to compare ourselves with, you have the federal police, the FBI, you have the state police for all the states, you have city, first of all you have county police for the local governments, and then you have city police, like the New York or LAPD. If you don't have that structure of multi-level policing, the essential architecture for sustainable security is not in place. It doesn't matter what you do at the top, at the federal security level. You need police men and women patrolling each of our villages, nooks and corners. And that level of patrolling is usually done by the local police, the lowest level of policing, that are always there, that are present. Now you come out of your house every 2 or 3 hours, find police patrol passing by your house.
They know almost everybody.
And they know everyone. They live in the locality. So real policing is preventing the organization, the planning, and execution of criminal activity. It is not when criminal activity has manifested, then you send the military after them, trying to fight them. By then they have built structures. We have allowed criminal organizations to build formidable structures over the last 15 to 20 years because we just didn't get down to build the basic architecture that ensures that you don't even allow any individuals to build criminal structures. They are taken out at the very lowest level, by the lowest level of policing. So that is one major areas of action that we need to deal with. If that is in place, you will see Nigeria doing 5, 6, 7% GDP growth without any extra work, because the primary policy reforms for rapid growth have been established. That's why we are getting commendations from the World Bank, the IMF, and all other stakeholders. The primary reforms for very rapid growth are in place. But you now need an enabling environment of peace and security, where, for example, you can go to the farm and farm 18 hours, as we used to do, and farmers leave the home very early in the morning. They are there till very late in the evening. They have farmhouses on the farm. They walk, they sleep, they wake up, they go and farm again. That was how farming was being done. But you cannot get there.
Feed there, rest there, do whatever.
Everything there. You know, you can't get there unless we have a granular policing system that starts from bottom up. And when you live in a village, you know there's a police system around your village, that you probably have the phone number of the local policeman that you can call. That I've seen some people passing by that don't look like us. And so you stop the build-up of criminal groups and cells way before they become as large as we now have them all over the place.
Brilliant stuff. I agree with you so very much that there is that correlation. Security, businesses, that enabling environment, we must make it work for us to be able to achieve inclusive growth. Again, that word comes in again, inclusive growth, because that's how we can achieve that. But let's look at more money is coming in to the governors, to the local governments, and even the president read out part of his speeches today that there's been improved funding. My question to you really would be, in your assessment, in your understanding, do you think that they are doing enough to support the federal government now? Because many know that, yes, the man on the streets would just say, oh, the reforms by government, reforms by government. But do you think that with increased federal allocation, that the state governments and local governments are doing enough to support the federal government?
First of all, it's not a matter of supporting the federal government.
Wow.
It's a matter of the obligation to their people, to the people in the states, to the people in the local government. In other climes, a local government can only survive if they have the confidence of the people in that local government, and if they see that the local government administration is accountable for whatever resources they get. So the accountability at the local government, at the state level, are the big issues. So first of all, public knowledge, transparency of how much is going to the local governments and the state governments. And as individuals, as people, we also have to be more active, because the information of funds flowing to the states and local governments are there in some public domains, websites and so on. So first, people in the local government, people in the states have to say, Mr. Governor, this is what we see coming to this state this month. Where has it gone? What are we going to do with it? What will be done? If that process of accountability is not done by the people, but we just accuse governors that, they don't do what they want to do with the money, the governors are not going to change. They are not going to change just because somebody is saying, they are not using. It's a fact that some governors are doing much better than some other governors in the way, first of all, they account for the funding and what is visible in terms of improvements. But you cannot say that of all the 36 governors. But it is up to the people in each state to hold governors accountable. If we don't hold governors and local administrations, local government chairman and the councils accountable, then you will always have these issues of funds flowing, not just from federal government, but from other agencies, from taxes collected by the states and the local governments that are abused. So the real issue is, how much do we as a people want to hold our governors and local governments accountable?
Big question. Now, back to the plan. There's a renewed Hope National Development Plan, again, fresh from that gathering, and it's a plan of 2026 to 2030, evidence-based, and I want you to, make your comments with regards to it. The focus, again, economic diversification. We've been talking about diversification for some time now. Human capital development, national competitiveness, and all of this Nigeria first policy of government and all that is expected from it. Private sector-led growth, climate resilience. Now, what do you make of, because many would say, Nigeria is not always, we don't lack plans. Sometimes it's implementing these plans, or how do we implement them to the latter for us to get the positives of it?
First of all those things are not new.
Because we've been having back reviewing them and coming back with some.
The Nigerian economy is heavily diversified, very heavily diversified. There is no sector of the economy that you say is 80 or 90% of the economy. Whether it is GDP growth, whether it's employment, the economy is highly diversified. The only area where we can say we are not sufficiently diversified is foreign exchange earnings that come from oil and diaspora remittances as the two major sources. But as far as the domestic economy is concerned, we are highly diversified. And we are beginning to see a much larger increase of foreign currency earnings from other sources. In addition to diaspora remittances, non-oil export is growing very rapidly. So in terms of diversification, cannot be a major new intention. The real issue is how fast are we growing the various sectors of an already diversified economy? How fast are we growing the export economy? How far are we growing the services economy? How far are we growing the most critical part of concern, manufacturing? We are not growing manufacturing enough because the power infrastructure to enable us manufacture at a lower competitive rate compared to even African countries are not there. So if there's any sector of the economy that we are concerned about regarding diversification, is that our manufacturing sector is not contributing its proper quota, its expected quota to the economy if we have to the diversification. And what needs to be done then are, first of all, the issue of power, the issue of human capital, because a lot of manufacturing involves technology, which we are still importing. When you look at equipment, we are still importing a lot of equipment that we can fabricate in Nigeria. So human capacity, as one of the major goals of the plan, at the level of local technology that is completely in Nigeria. In other words, technology that can convert our raw materials, our steel, and our other products into finished and intermediate products. We need the capacity to do that. If you look at the maritime industry, for example, most of the capacity in that industry is still imported. Most of our shipping industry, the seamen in most of our vessels are still foreigners. So capacity building in all those areas are part of this whole drive of the new plan. But it has to be very clear that diversification is not the issue. It's how fast do we grow each of the sectors of the economy. That should be the main focus of this new plan.
Always interesting talking to you. Time is fast spent. But one more question before I let you go. You talked on manufacturing, which is key, and everyone knows that sector remains key to economic growth and development. But at 27% NPR, that has been also a big one where manufacturers are saying something needs to be done. Some say, no, we shouldn't expect that shift in the coming meeting. We should be next week or something around that. And some say we should expect that shift maybe in the meeting after this coming one. What do you think would form conversations around that meeting, the first NPC meeting for 2026?
Well, generally, the central bank and the NPC have done a great job since they resumed in a very, very difficult situation of managing inflation, trying to face managing interest rates. Initially, the focus was, let's get inflation under control. We need to get, and they have done a good job of that. The second is to build confidence in internal investors by building our reserves. That is, our reserves are now going up. Now, the central bank are beginning to look at a very gradual but very carefully calibrated reduction of interest rates over time. But manufacturing as an industry cannot wait for that. So manufacturing must attract funding outside the money markets. There must be options. Development finance funding for manufacturing. Manufacturing cannot wait for commercial banking interest rates to come down from 27 or 28 to 15, 16 that makes sense for manufacturing. So a lot of development finance and long-term funds for manufacturing is part of the basic requirements for any new plan that will propel Nigeria to get out of this 4 to 5% to actually 7 to 8% GDP growth.
Interesting stuff. Mr. Gilbert Dawusa is CEO, UHY Professional Services, immediate past president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you for coming through to the studio.
Thank you.
I appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll take another quick